Welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast, a show designed to help dads disciple their children. It's for fathers who don't just want to raise children, but lead them in a way that honors Jesus. It's a place where you might discover, for the first time, that you're not a father on accident, which makes you, of course, a father on purpose. To help guide us on that journey are our hosts, Kent Evans and Lawson Brown. Kent's a husband, a dad, an author, and the co-founder of Manhood Journey. Lawson's a husband, a father, a military veteran, and business executive. He believes that if he just keeps trying, one day he'll get Kent to have a coherent train of thought. Good luck with that. As you listen, we hope you'll find biblical ideas, practical tips, and even have some fun along the journey. Every single dad is a disciple maker. The only question? Discipling them. How? To where? Let's discover that together. As we dive in, remember, you are not a father on accident, so go be a father on purpose. Welcome aboard.
Lawson, one thing that dads tell us they struggle with a lot is communication. They want to have good, open, meaningful communication with their kids or wives or friends, but they just don't seem to know how to get there. And what I want to propose on today's episode is at least 3 things have to be aligned for us to have great communication. That is with our kids, our wives, our families, or our boss, or anybody. And these are things that can get in our way, or they can help us. Things like our heart, our minds, our mouths, our pasts, our personalities. There's a lot of things that can get in our way or help us. But I want to focus on 3 things that can, when aligned, unlock really great, healthy communication. Before we dive in, I want to remind the dad listening that this show is brought to you by Range Leather. And the guys at Range Leather, and ladies, I didn't mean that as a gender-specific reference, the people at Range Leather do an amazing job of making high-quality products in Laramie, Wyoming, out of Horween leather. It is made right here in the good old US of A. They do wallets, purses, bags, folios, earrings, Apple Watch bands, all kinds of cool stuff. And because they're a sponsor of our show, with the code MJ15, you can get 15% off your next order. Go to rangeleather.com and use the code MJ15. Meanwhile, if you want a very specific resource that will help you leverage today's show, go to our website and snag our Breaking Barriers field guide. It's a small ebook that you can read in 20 minutes, and it gives you some great tips on how to unlock really healthy communication. There you go, Lawson. Are you ready to dive in, my friend?
I am. I appreciate that. I didn't realize about Breaking Barriers. I'm going to go check that out. And I want to add that Range Leather, I just got an email this morning from them that they have a new wallet line just recently released. And I was looking at it. I wish I hadn't bought a wallet recently, but you know what? I may, air quote, lose it and have to go to Range Leather and get a new one.
Air quote, it's gone.
I don't know where it went.
Honey, I need a new wallet.
The new one you bought me? I don't know.
No.
But I like this Range Leather one that I just got in the mail. Yeah. This is like not just guys, that email us, but I think just in general, you talk to 10 people, and if they're honest, we all 10 of us would struggle with, are we communicating well? Are we communicating in a way that is effective and edifying? And this is a great topic. I think it's widely applicable.
I'm going to begin at the end and tell a dad, spoiler alert, if you think that the vast majority of your communication is done with your mouth, hate to break the news to you, but you're looking in the wrong place to solve your communication dilemma. And this is not a show about body language or tone of voice. It's deeper than that. It's about 3 things that we want to align if we want to have healthy, God-honoring, truthful communication. And the last one is our mouth. So of the 3 things, the mouth is number 3. Number 2 is our ears, how well we listen. But number 1 is our heart. Is our heart. And here's the problem with the phrase heart. Two things I think happen with the guys who hear the word heart. For the most part, if they're anything like me, two things happen. Number one, they think, gee whiz, this is a show about emotions and vulnerability and transparency. I mean, there's some of that. Some of that is true. But the problem with that is that when we see heart, especially the word heart in the Old Testament in the Bible, it's not talking about your feelings. That is not at all what the primary meaning of most of the Hebrew words used for heart actually mean. It means more like the center of who you are. More like the center of who you are. This nexus, this intersection of your passions, your desires, your opinions, your beliefs, to some degree, your emotions, your thoughts. So when it says heart, it's not just talking about our emotions. In fact, quite frankly, that's a very, very small part. It's actually talking about who you are. It's almost like my friend John Blumberg out of Chicago would call it integrity. Integrity is not being honest. Integrity is acting in alignment with your values. And so some people who do really dastardly things have super high integrity in a sense, right? Because
they did what they said they were going to do.
They're acting square in line with their values.
Right.
And so for us, when we hear the word heart, I would love for guys to think more about who they are, like mind, soul, body, the whole thing. That's way closer to the emotion that we see in the Old Testament for sure, certainly the New Testament as well, definitely the Old Testament. So it's not just our words. In fact, it's not even mostly our words. It's how we are believing about a certain situation. And the challenge is we often talk out of the overflow of our heart. So sometimes our words are like a compass. They point us back to what is really in our heart, in our mind, and in our thoughts when these words come out.
That's really cool. We've kind of hijacked in at least American culture the heart, the emoji of heart means like, oh, I love you, or like that was really sweet, something along those lines, or it. And I've often thought to myself too, like when someone says they're speaking from the heart. You really dig into this from a biblical standpoint, from the Hebrew. I see in the notes here, LEB/LEBAB combined used 595 times. It's kind of the heart was like the center of your self. And, we point to our heart, and it's not our actual beating heart. Like there's
not that either, right?
It doesn't. Our ears, our mouth, our actual beating heart. It's all our brain. But when we talk about coming from the heart, that would be the center of our thought, emotion, and will, not just feelings. And I see here it says also reason and intention. And so, how do you relate that to like? When you're communicating with your kids, you're communicating with your family or your boss or your friends, that sense of authenticity or being like really for their good, for your good, for the good of that conversation. It's not describing your emotions necessarily only when you're talking from the heart, or centering that thought process in that way. Does that? Am I on track with like maybe, I don't know, authenticity or being your true self and really asking and probing in a way that your children can feel like they too can share from the heart?
Absolutely. Well, so as an example, I'll use a hypothetical situation that I've never had happen in my family, but other dads have told me this can happen in their family.
Okay. Keep going.
Let's just say, for the sake of argument, you think one of your older kids, it's easier for older kids because you get more emotion, you get more decisions, you get more they have a lot more choices and agency. So let me just talk about like your 17 or 18-year-old son or daughter, and you think they are, let's say, lazy, just for the sake of argument. That's never happened in my family. I've never thought such a dastardly thought about my own children. But let's just say you think one of your kids is lazy. Therefore, you start to hear everything they say through that filter. Or you start to observe every behavior that they have through that same filter. So let's say you have one child you think is really lazy and one child you think is really industrious. And the industrious child says, I'm going to go take a nap. And you say, man, good for you. You've worked so hard. It's about time. You probably need a nap.
Yep.
Where the lazy kid says, I'm going to go take a nap. And you go, there we go again. Right. Always napping, right? Same situation. But what's happened is stored up in your heart is a belief system about that person. Now, it may be founded on some relatively accurate and voluminous data points from the past. Perhaps, just perhaps, you have a lot of reasons to believe what you believe. But if you start from the place of, I don't trust you, or I think you're lazy, or I think you're out to get me, or I think you never are completely honest, if that's our mental starting point, well, then guess what? A lot of our words in our communication is going to follow. So I was with a friend today at lunch, and he is a friend I've had I'm 55 now. We've been friends probably about 50 years. Yeah. Alex is talking about confirmation bias, right? Would be kind of the psychological term for this, is that I'm looking for a certain you, and I'm going to find it in whatever you do, which means all my words, all my communication is going to be bent that way. And I was with a friend of mine named Dave today, and we have so much water under the bridge, Lawson, like literally friends for nearly 50 years. He and I both have a lot of beliefs about each other. And actually, they're all, I don't know about his for me, but mine for him are super positive. And I assume the best, right? If he ever says something to me, I don't go, man, he's probably out to get me.
Right.
or what did he really mean by that? I don't normally have a lot of negative bias toward Dave. In fact, I probably have the opposite problem, where I might assume he's up to something great and nice, even if he isn't, right? Because we have so much good history between the two of us. And here's where a lot of dads get with their kids who turn 13, 15, 17, as they go through their teen years.
Yep.
The dad starts to read into a lot of their interactions, and he starts to communicate based on his read, which I'm not arguing is entirely inaccurate or unfounded. I'm just saying it presents a unique communication problem, because now we're not having the conversation. We're actually having like 27 conversations all at once, because I'm still litigating the last 30 from the last 29 times you were lazy or unaccountable, right? And so my words are sharper. I have an accusatory tone. I have a disbelief in the way I talk to you. And then I wonder, golly, why don't my kids trust me? Well, because I start from a place of not trusting them either.
Proverbs 4, verse 23 says, keep your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. And 24, right after it comes, put away, in case you didn't know, 23, it comes before 24.
What's the next verse? This is a trick question. Okay, Bible trivia. After Proverbs 4:23, what comes next?
24. No, what does it say?
Right.
24 says, put away from you crooked speech and put devious talk far from you. And so I honed in on that word diligence in 23. Keep your heart, or watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. And so can we at all times, 24/7, keep watch over our heart so that we don't bite at our kid or come with a confirmation bias to a conversation? Of course not. We're going to get it wrong. But can we, when we know that we are going to be interacting with them later on this afternoon about something that happened at school or some problem that we know that they were maybe not completely guilty of, or nor were they completely innocent of. And so pray some and think ahead of time, not about the situation. Pray about them. Pray about
Yeah.
your heart. It doesn't say watch over your kid's heart, or if you are in an argument, watch over their heart. It says keep your heart, watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. And then 24 kind of ratchets down on that a bit and says, put away from you crooked speech. Now we're talking about speech. Put away from you crooked speech and put devious talk far from you.
Yeah.
And so, as a dad, how many times have I been thoughtless or less than thoughtful about a situation, and because I didn't, I just compounded the problem or made it worse,
Right.
Olivia or Abigail or Audrey come in with something, and I just had a bad day. I just had the third difficult conversation of my work day, and was just, walking around with a dark cloud over my head and steam coming out of my ears. And they come in with something, and I'm like, "You really think that's a problem? Like, let me tell you what a problem is." And it's because I didn't watch over my heart with diligence.
Yeah.
I'm not from it was not flowing springs of life. I'm the dad. I want to be ready to bring empathy, compassion, correction, whatever it may be, into that situation. And you just can't rely on yourself alone. Number one, thankfully we're not alone in this. And you can't just walk in cold. Some of this takes time and preparation and thought and prayer.
So recently we had somebody in our ministry, they bought something online, and then a few weeks later they submitted a challenge through the credit card company. Basically like, hey, I didn't buy this. It's like fraud. And so then our credit card company not only is going to take the money back, but then we get charged a penalty whenever that happens, right? So we pay, I don't know, 15 or 20 bucks every time somebody rightly challenges a purchase. And so what was odd about this one particular purchase was every now and then we'll have fraud, little games people play on our website that are bad actors. But in this case, it looked like a legitimate buyer who had a legitimate purchase, who then just up and decided to want their money back. And so what was really interesting was we had a brief conversation internally. What could their motives have been? Right. So one, they are a thief, and they have sport going around buying Bible study related materials and then getting their money back. That actually seems like a relatively low probability possibility. Or they are confused. They didn't, maybe the credit card came across different than they expected, and they don't remember that charge, and they buy a lot of stuff. And so they just challenged it, kind of, not really investigating. Number three, we've actually had this happen. A husband and wife didn't know the other did it. So the wife spent money on the card. The husband is paying the bills. He goes, I don't recognize that charge. And he just challenges it by hitting the button on his app. And then later they go, oh, shoot, my bad. We didn't talk. No problem. Like, that's really happened. Or what's probably the most realistic is that they were disappointed somehow with the product. They felt like they didn't get their money's worth, or maybe the download didn't come through, for all I know. They had bought something digital. But here's what's interesting. Do I call them up and go, hey, what are you doing? Challenging the purchase. And I just come out of the gate angry with them, freaking out because they stole our money, right? Well, that's odd, because that's probably it's the least likely scenario of all the ones.
If I'm going anywhere to steal money, it's not.
I mean, for real. You want like $23 back plus, it's unbelievable. And so, but what's interesting is, right, the tone of our message back to that person is either going to be, hey, what are you doing, criminal? Or it's going to be, hey, maybe we did something wrong. Our bad. What did we do wrong that disappointed you so that you decided to do this? Or did you even know? I've had several donors throughout the years who have had their credit card get changed, and then their donation drops off. I'm at lunch with one guy one time, and I said twice, hey, by the way, thanks for your past support. And we kept eating lunch. And then about 10 minutes later, something came up, and I said it again. I can't remember what came up. And he raised his hand up and he goes, hang on, did you say past support?
Yeah.
And I said,
that's what I was about.
I appreciate you having supported us in the past. And he goes, why is it passed? And I go, well, you stopped 3 months ago. And he goes, I didn't even know. And I'm like, well, we can fix that problem. Like, that won't be any problem. But what's interesting is our setting with people at work, our setting with customers. Like, if you've been trained for 5 minutes in customer service, assume the best, ask questions, don't make accusations, etc. But we forget all that when we become a dad, and we just start out with, you're probably lazy, you're probably disrespectful, you're probably trying to get around the rules somehow, and we come in guns blazing. In our hearts, we start off angry, and then we wonder, golly, how come nobody's listening to us?
Yeah. The second one, our ears. I've been guilty a number of times of hearing half of the situation or interrupting mid-sentence and taking over with the answer. And I've seen this before.
I never interrupt people.
My gosh.
It was too easy. Sorry.
So dumb. Yeah. It's like, look, especially as our kids have gotten older, they're getting, at least there are more opportunities for more recent memories of, like, they're getting into the work world, or they're dealing with something that, buying a car or whatever it may be. And I've been down that road a number of times. And so I listen with like half of one ear, but my brain is already moving toward the answer that I know is the answer because I've been down this road. And, what we're missing is what Proverbs 18:2 says: a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. And so I've found over time that a better way to handle a situation like that is to listen and listen and listen and ask questions and probe. And more times than not, it's interesting how the solution arrives itself without me doing anything other than listening or asking questions. And when I don't, there's a good chance that I've just contributed to, making Olivia or Audrey or whomever at work feel less valuable, that what they're struggling with is uninteresting to me, because I've been there, done that, and here's what you got to do next, like.
Wow. Yeah. It's like you're reading my mail, because I do that often. I'll just cut people off because I'm like, let's get to the end. Let's go to the. I remember one time starting a business presentation with the amount of money I wanted. Like no prep, no lead up, no backstory, no intro. I just said, hey, I need 150 grand for this project. And then I let the executive back me up, however far around the bases he wanted to back me up, until we got all the way to where he was happy, as opposed to building it forward. And that's because one time I had presented to the same executive, and every time I presented something, he would say, well, what about? And I'm like, I'm getting there. Right. And he finally one day just goes, can you get there any faster? And so the next time I just walked in and said, I need 150 grand. And he looked at me and he goes, for what? So then I just started going backward, till we got to about second base, and then we had it. And I was like, I got
That's
it.
funny.
Because he's a very fast thinker. And so, I figured out how to tell it. But with kids, that's not a smart strategy for two reasons. One, they feel unheard. But secondly, they've got to learn, right? Like, it's one thing for me to take the knife out of my kid's hand and cut the box open. It's another thing for me to hold their hand and show them what angle they should be at so that they run the least amount of risk while they cut the box open.
Interesting.
And then it's another to leave them alone entirely and let them cut the box open, running the risk that they're going to cut their leg in the same process, right? Over those pieces, what you and I are talking about is we started by saying, look, step one, you got to have your heart aligned. And the sad truth of the matter is often your words reveal your heart. And I don't want to skip past this just yet before we go to ears and mouth. Often your heart is revealed in your words, and you don't like it. And so you go, well, and then you just start to make excuses. right? Well, I mean, they were out of line, or we were in a hurry, or I had to go, or I blah blah blah, whatever you're. Maybe, or you were impatient, or you were angry, or you were judgmental, and so then these words came out, and you're like, wow, those words sound like the words of a lunatic. And then you go, maybe I'm the lunatic, like maybe it's me. And so I want to make sure that the guy listening who wants to get better at communicating uses his words as a diagnostic to discover what's in his heart. What's in his heart. Because what's in your mind and your thoughts and your emotions is probably going to come out in the form of your words or your silence. And that's very indicative. And then second, you just started touching on it. Then we've got to get our ears tuned. So I want to put mouth at the end. I want to put what we say at the end. I want to put what we think and how we feel. That's our heart. Then I want to put how we listen. Are we hearing things correctly as our second step? And then I want to put mouth in third place. And sometimes you hear people say marriage is, a 50-50 proposition, or no, it's 100-100 or whatever. I think communication is 100% listening. Then it's 100% talking and listening. But it begins with really, really good listening.
Yeah. And listening doesn't mean being quiet necessarily. Listening is
that's a good point. What do you mean by that?
It's engaged. Listening is not sitting there waiting on them to finish the story. If you don't understand something or want to know something more about something, that's when you're asking. It's being inquisitive and engaged and curious. And maybe you have been down this road before, but they haven't, or maybe not near as much as you. And so, having them explain how they feel, what happened, they need to tell the story. And sometimes they may leave out a detail, and maybe you suspect they left out something that was critical to them having, a full understanding. Meaning, here's what I mean by that is, that let's say you're the dad and you're kind of scrutinizing what happened at school, and that you're getting their side of the story.
True.
Right. And so ask questions, probe, get them to be a storyteller that gives details from a kind of a third party objective look at it. That helps them pull away, kind of zoom out, and it enables you to get a kind of holistic view of it. Maybe you have been down this road before, but dude, roads are different today. Like a bully at school when I was 12 is can behave in very different ways today, because of all the things that we've talked about before with technology, with teachers, being in a totally different environment and all that. And so, maybe we do understand to a degree. That's not the point. The point is, have we seen this? Have we seen this movie before?
Yeah.
It's getting them to understand what's happening.
Yeah.
And getting them to a place where they're interpreting it. And, to our first point about the heart, having them get their heart aligned with what it is that's happening in that situation so that they can be a good communicator. And it's all, it's all a two-way street. So is it 100, 50-50? I think you're right. My point is it's in the situations that, it's more about them getting it off their chest or describing what's going on. It's like 90% listening, 10% of talking. The listening, though, is not just sitting there stoic. It's body, when you're talking and you're using your hands and your body language and your facial expressions, that's communicating, that's proactive communicating outwardly. When you're receiving, there's also body language involved with that. So be aware of how you're listening and what questions you're asking, and try to step aside from solution finding to real understanding.
Well, One time I was interviewing for a job, and this was back when video was pretty new in terms of like transatlantic video, at least for sure. Like people weren't using Skype every day or Zoom by any stretch. Somebody just heard that and they're like, what is Skype? Okay. So anyway, but this is back when you had like a lot of, and so seeing someone on video was a little bit rare back in the day. And I was interviewing with a guy who was a senior executive at a really big company and multi-billion-dollar company. He was the chief something officer. And we get about 20 minutes into this interview, and I'm interviewing for a position on a team adjacent to his, not directly reporting to him, but his vote would matter. And we get about 20 minutes in, and I remember telling this guy, his name was Pascal, and I said, Pascal, forgive me. I'm asking all the questions. When you have questions for me, just fire away. And he just leans into the camera and goes, no, that's okay. I just prefer to see what you ask.
Oh,
I remember feeling like one of those scenes out of Alice in Wonderland where like the room started tilting and the ceiling wasn't level. And I was like, whoa. And the whole time that I'm talking, asking him questions, he's making a lot of character judgments about me.
Yeah,
and
right.
about what I ask. And I thought, wow, that's next level. I mean, it's one
Dude,
thing
that's
to talk,
right.
it's another
That's
thing
so
to ask.
true. That is a great perspective on what I'm talking about. Yeah.
I was intimidated. I was like, okay, well, then the last 20 minutes are sunk because I've already, burned 20 with Pascal the Observer. He's also the same guy where a year and a half later, he both told me I had completely botched something, like in public with 5 or 6 people at this lunch table. And then, no joke, in my entire career, he's one of, I can't think of any others. He literally grabbed me and kissed me on the head. No joke. Because of another thing, it's like in the same meeting, within 15 minutes, he told me I was a complete failure and then kissed me on the head for something I did right. It was so bizarre. So bizarre. True story. So when we're listening, the question is, are we listening to correct? Or are we listening to connect? Are we listening to correct? Or are we listening to connect?
There you go.
And behind correction, we become judgmental and talkative and critical. Behind connection, we become inquisitive and probably even more compassionate. We're like, For example, one of the occupational hazards of what I do for a living is, you end up running your mouth either on a podcast like this or you're preaching or teaching. And, people are going to have opinions about what you said. And so you try to do it right and be honest and be truthful and all that. But you're going to still have people who have ideas about how you could have done it better. And there's not too long ago, I was at an event and a guy came up to me after a talk and just said, hey, I have a suggestion. And I thought, and like in my head, I became defensive, right? I became defensive. I shouldn't have. Like that's a mistake. That's an error. But I should not have become defensive. I should have become inquisitive. I should have become curious.
Right.
Because what am I going to lose? I could get feedback. I could learn something. I could see myself from a different perspective. I might be educated. Heaven forbid I was actually wrong and he's right. And I'm going to learn something, right? So for me, that's the question is, are we listening to correct? Or are we listening to connect? And unfortunately, with someone like that, I often listen to correct, and I want to push back on their assessment. When what I ought to be doing is just listening to connect. And if I can map that to my home, here's the tough thing, Lawson, about everything we do as dads, right? We're both demonstrating and modeling and setting an example all at once. And so if you're a really terrible listener, guess what? You're probably going to raise really terrible listeners. Right? Not because you chose to, or you said, here's what I want to do. I want all my kids to be mouthy and aggressive and stupid and foolish and only air their opinions and never listen. Like, okay, if that's your opinion, you're listening to the wrong podcast. There's lots of podcasts you go listen to that would help you reinforce that position. But if we want to be godly dads who raise kids to know the Lord, we want them to be able to hear the voice of the Lord. We want them to be able to be good listeners. Guess what? We're going to need to model that.
Yeah, you got to be one. I love the listen to, correct, or connect. I thought of the prosecutor. They lead with questions that they know the answer to. Were you or were you not on the corner of 5th and Main at 12:05 a.m. on the night of April 4th? That is not listening to connect. That's listening to correct. That's a really good way of saying that. At some point, it does help to talk. You can get your heart right. You can listen really well. Not the entirety of the communication happens with our mouth, but at some point it does help. And I think, there are people like the guy that Audrey, in her decorating business, she works with a guy named Kevin. Kevin's a carpenter. He does everything. He's an electrician. I mean, the guy is just super talented, very skilled.
Shout out Kevin. Hey, Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin Gomez. And he works alone a lot. Like he is working on something that takes time and attention and thoughtfulness and exact, measurements. And he's got to be careful. Sometimes he's up high on, so he's not working in a 5-person team environment. He is, iPod, or not iPod. Oh my gosh, dating myself.
iPod.
AirPod.
Explain to the listener, what's an iPod?
right. And so he's one of those kind of people that just doesn't talk a lot. He likes his time.
Kind of like me.
Yeah, a lot like Kent Evans, the mouth. And so not every guy is listening to this going, yeah, but I'm a really great communicator. I know how to use my words well, and so that's okay. That's okay, because a lot of what we communicate doesn't happen through our mouth. It does help as a dad to be able to listen well, ask questions. A lot of times our kids will come up with the answer themselves if we guide well. But what you're doing in all of that is you're modeling. I think we're modeling that sometimes solutions take patience. Sometimes the answer is we don't know. I don't know. I've never run into that, or I don't know how you're going to be able to handle that tomorrow. Let's talk about it. And maybe we try something. Maybe we try this. It's not you're not the dad who is sitting in the judgment seat and doling out the simple truths that work every time. Like, take that pressure off yourself.
Yeah.
It's more about connecting with your kids and learning together. A few things that can help, and that is share something that has happened with you, where you were embarrassed or depressed or defeated or excited, it worked great. And you were assured, you were reassured in something. Gives them that confidence. Also helps them feel they're not alone. Talk about things, that you maybe handled well or not well, but display honesty and an assessment of what worked and what didn't. Ask thoughtful questions. We talked about that. And then here's one I think that is Olivia references with me often when she's dealing with clients. Being patient with silence. Sometimes people need time. Sometimes people need time to process. And if there is silence while someone's thinking, let your kid think. Let it breathe. Let that conversation with your wife breathe. And you don't have to fill that silence with something at all times. So I think our mouths are important. I like how this has been framed up as it's maybe the least important. We do have to communicate, and words help, but that's kind of the I don't know. It's not the final piece, but it's like the least important piece of what I think we're trying to get at.
Well, and I think it's the piece that's downstream, right? So in other words, it's really important, but upstream from our mouth is have we heard the situation correctly? And upstream from that is, are we thinking correctly? How's our heart? How's our mind? So if we've got our mind and our ears, then our mouth, while not insignificant, it becomes more of, an extension of what's already gone before. So like, as an example, I have violated several scripture verses more than once, right? One of which is Proverbs 15:1. It says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And man, I've messed that up so often.
It feels counterintuitive in culture sometimes. You know, if somebody's coming at you with with wrath, I combined.
They got this rash.
Yeah,
coming at you.
Yeah, they're coming at you with their rash. I got wrath and harsh mixed up. You know, if someone's coming at you angrily, what we're told is defend yourself, you know, and step up for yourself and be ready to smack back. What Scripture says is a soft answer. We'll cool that situation.
One of the elders at our church used to do this example at the deacon retreats. He would talk about communication, and he would say, hey, every situation you walk into, you're carrying two buckets. You're carrying a bucket of water and a bucket of gasoline. And the question is, which one is more full, and which one are you going to be first to dump out? And he goes, the wise man carries in a bucket of water and leaves the bucket of gasoline outside. Like, don't walk into situations carrying a bucket of gasoline and just pour trouble onto trouble and make it even worse, right? For example, and there's guys who listen, and there's, you know, we're all on the introvert, extrovert spectrum, and to some degree, arguably, some are a little more talkative, some are a little more quiet. And to those who are, there is a particular guy that I'd like to talk to for a moment, because it's me talking into the mirror. You may be the guy who takes pride in the fact that you're the tell it like it is guy. You're the guy who just says what's on his mind. And what I want to remind you of, right, is you're getting that about half right? So being a quote unquote truth teller is only half of the prescription that we see in the New Testament. Galatians 6:1 says it this way, and there's a few other places, but I'll just pick this one. It says, brothers, if anyone's caught in any transgression, so we're going to correct somebody, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. And so I think for guys who are wired like me, and I know there's a bunch of them, where we want to just say the truth and be blunt and efficient, and we want to say what's on our mind, often that's only half of what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to do it in a spirit of gentleness, and we're supposed to be keeping watch on ourselves. And for us, the truth tellers in the room, we got to be love givers. Like, we got to share the truth, as it says in another place in the New Testament, share the truth in love. We don't share the truth like a battering ram. You know, we share it like a first aid kit. You know, it's not meant to do more damage. It's meant to repair and restore and be a balm. And so for the guy listening who's the truth teller, you know, take it easy, man. Like, that's not the only tool in your toolkit.
I remember you said something about that before, you know, like where you go, hey, look, I just tell it like it is. You said, no, you're telling it like you think it is. Like, that's right. Like, you're telling it from your perspective only. And it may not be the truth. It may not be accurate. You know, you're seeing it as your truth, but that's not necessarily the truth. And so, yeah, you got to be very careful with that. It's almost like I've been with folks before that kind of come at things like that, and it's almost like if they lead with that, like, hey, look, I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to say it like it is. Like, that doesn't excuse what it is you're about to say just because you caveat it with this. It's like someone that says, hey, look, no, I don't mean any disrespect, and then they go on to disrespect.
You're about to be disrespected. No offense intended.
There you go. Yeah.
But prepare to be offended.
Right. Well, dads, I think this is a great topic. Try some stuff out. You know, if your tendency is to not hardly talk much at all, you know, lean into that piece a little bit, but do it with an ear that has been listening, that is aligned with your heart. And if you're the dad that talks too much, ratchet that way down and start where Kent began, with our hearts. I think it's a, you know, let's call it a 70-20 or no, 60-30.
Are you 10. Making these numbers up as you go?
You know what I'm saying? 60 heart. Yeah, I got to be analytical, man. Let me get
29 and a half. Oh, dead leaves. Carry the one.
Yeah. 60.
If you
30,
need a calculator
10.
to listen to our podcast episode, we have messed up.
Oh, goodness. But you get the point. Like, check your heart, listen a whole lot more than you talk, and include in that this spirit of, I want this to be a good, healthy, honest, transparent, authentic conversation, and I'm going to lead. I'm going to lead by example and be real, talk about things that have happened to us that make our kids feel safe, sharing what they truly feel and maybe where they have messed up, and approach these kinds of opportunities where you are there not to correct, but to connect. Have a great week, guys.
Hey, Dad, guess what? Today's episode does not get produced for free. We have some costs around here, and aside from our amazing sponsors, we have a group of people who help share that burden, and they're called the Fatherhood Guard. For $25 a month, you can join the Fatherhood Guard and be a monthly supporter of our ministry and this podcast. What do you get for that? Well, first, the joy of supporting a ministry like Manhood Journey. Secondly, you help animate things around here. You get cool merch. You get sneak previews. You're part of the insider club at Manhood Journey when you join the Fatherhood Guard. Would you consider doing that? Head over to manhoodjourney.org and you can join today. Secondly, consider sharing this episode with somebody you know. There's a pretty good chance that someone you trust shared this show with you in the past. Now, there are men around you who trust you. It might be your brother-in-law, your friend, your pastor. You know somebody who would benefit from today's episode, who's a dad that needs to be encouraged. Share this show with them today. And remember, as you go, you are not a father on accident, so go be a father on purpose.
I wish I had this microphone everywhere I went so I could just...
That's right.
Hey.
You should just start taking it to meetings and just go, listen, when I bring the microphone up in front of my mouth, I'm the only one talking. Everybody understand?
I'm sorry, who has the microphone? I think it's me.
Does this look like a listening device to you?